Days after the closing ceremony of the 2026 Winter Olympics, something happened that almost nobody saw coming. No cameras caught it, no press release announced it. It wasn't a headline, at least not at first. It was a phone call. Steph Curry, the man who'd been the face of the Golden State Warriors for over a decade, quietly picked up his phone and reached out to a 20-year-old figure skater from Oakland named Alysa Liu, and what he offered her wasn't a shout-out on Instagram. It wasn't a generic congratulations text. According to Warriors beat reporter Marcus Thompson II, Curry personally invited Alysa and her entire family to be his guests at Chase Center. All 5 siblings, her dad, everyone. Now, that might sound like a simple gesture on the surface, but sit with it for a second, because when you understand who Alysa Liu actually is, and everything she had to go through just to stand on that Olympic podium, the phone call starts to mean something much bigger. For 2 weeks in Milan, Alysa Liu turned into one of the most talked about athletes in America. It started with the team event, where Team USA skated to a gold medal in the figure skating team competition. Alysa was a key piece of that win, and for a lot of viewers, that was the first time they really took notice of her. But the moment that changed everything came a few days later, the women's individual final. No teammates, no shared pressure, just her, the ice, and thousands of people watching in silence, plus millions more back home. What happened during that skate is hard to fully describe. It wasn't flashy or theatrical the way big Olympic moments sometimes are. It was controlled, almost eerily calm. She hit her jumps clean. Her spins were perfectly centered. The whole program had this quiet authority to it, like someone who had already made peace with whatever happened next. Even the commentators seemed caught slightly off guard, because sometimes the biggest moments in sport don't announce themselves until it's already over. And when her final score flashed across the screen, gold. Alysa Liu had just become the first American woman to win individual Olympic figure skating gold in more than 20 years. That alone is an incredible story, but it's not the whole story, because if you only focus on the medals, if you only look at what happened in Milan, you're missing the part that makes this mean something. Not long before those Olympics, Alysa Liu wasn't training for a comeback. She wasn't even skating competitively. She had walked away from the sport entirely. After competing in the 2022 Winter Olympics at just 16 years old, Alysa retired. And before you assume there was some injury, some scandal, some dramatic reason, there wasn't. What she described was something far more common and far less talked about in elite sports. Burnout. Pure and simple. She had been competing internationally since she was a young teenager. By the time Beijing ended, she'd already lived through years of early morning practices, non-stop travel, constant scrutiny, and the relentless grind of elite skating. She had given everything the sport asked for, and when it was over, she looked inward and realized she wasn't sure she wanted any of it anymore. So she left. She enrolled at UCLA. She went to class. She had a normal social life. No alarm clock set for 5 a.m., no judges watching her every move, no expectations. And honestly, for a while, it seemed like that was just it. Story over. Another prodigy who burned brightly and disappeared young. The skating world moved on, new names rose up. People assumed Alysa Liu was done, but here's where it gets interesting. During those 2 years away, without any pressure or obligation attached to it, Alysa started going back to the rink. Not to train, not to prepare for anything, just to skate. People who saw her in those sessions noticed she looked different. Lighter, more playful, like someone who had rediscovered the reason they fell in love with something in the first place, long before it became a job. That feeling, quiet and easy to miss, is what eventually turned into a comeback. By early 2024, rumors started moving through skating circles. She was training again, more seriously this time. Coaches re-entered the picture, and then she started competing again, and winning again. The skating world began paying attention in a different way now, because the athlete who came back looked and moved differently than the teenager who had left. Calmer before performances, less tension in the technical elements, more confidence in how she carried herself through a program. She wasn't skating like someone trying to prove a point. She was skating like someone who had nothing left to prove, and had chosen to come back anyway. Now, to understand how any of this was possible, the retirement, the time away, the freedom to return, you have to understand the environment Alysa grew up in, and that means you have to know her father. Arthur Liu grew up in China during one of the most politically turbulent periods of the late 20th century. The year 1989, when massive pro-democracy protests were met with a brutal government crackdown, became a turning point for him. He left. He made his way to the United States and eventually settled in the San Francisco Bay Area, one of the long-established homes for immigrant Chinese communities. He started over with very little, and years later, he made another decision that surprised a lot of people who knew him. He wanted to raise a family on his own. No partner, no traditional structure, just a deliberate choice. Through surrogacy and anonymous egg donors, he built one. 5 children. Alysa was the oldest. Think about what that actually looks like. 1 parent, 5 kids, a household that, by all accounts from people close to them, was energetic and chaotic and deeply, deeply connected. Arthur wasn't the kind of sports parent who treated his children like investments. He valued curiosity, creativity, breadth. He wanted his kids to explore life widely, not just chase titles. Skating entered the picture almost by accident. Just an activity near their Oakland home. But it became clear almost immediately that Alysa had something: balance, timing, an instinctive feel for movement on ice that coaches don't often see. By the time she was 13, she had already won the US National Championship, the youngest to do so in decades. The expectations that followed were enormous, Olympic-level pressure landing on a kid who couldn't yet drive. But the thing about growing up in Arthur Liu's household is that it seems to have given Alysa something rare in elite sports. Permission to stop when it became too much, and eventually permission to return when it felt right again. And so, by the time the 2026 Winter Olympics rolled around, Alysa Liu was 20 years old. She wasn't the anxious teenage prodigy the skating world remembered. She was someone who had already walked away from the sport, rebuilt her relationship with it from scratch, and come back, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. That shift showed up in everything: the way she moved, the way she performed under pressure, the way she held herself when the entire arena went quiet and the only thing left was her and the ice. 2 gold medals later, she was the biggest name in American figure skating, and a few days after that, somewhere in the Bay Area, Steph Curry picked up the phone. Curry has spent over a decade building something in the Bay: championships, culture, an identity for the Warriors that extends well beyond basketball. His name means something here in a way that's hard to fully put into words. So when he reached out personally, and not a PR move, not a social post, to invite Alysa and her whole family to a game, people paid attention. Maybe it was just a Bay Area athlete acknowledging another. Maybe it was something a bit more symbolic, a champion from one generation recognizing the arrival of another. Either way, there's a quiet poetry to it, because not long ago, Alysa Liu wasn't sure she even wanted to be a skater anymore, and now she was getting a personal invitation from one of the most famous athletes alive. Somewhere soon, at Chase Center, a young Olympic gold medalist from Oakland is going to walk into that arena with her dad and her siblings. She'll sit courtside not as a fan, as a guest. And if people in that building know her story, really know it, maybe they'll understand that what they're seeing isn't just a feel-good moment. It's the last scene of one of the more quietly remarkable sports comebacks in recent memory.